Chapter 1: The Unwanted Marriage. Rain poured heavily across the shining streets of New York City as luxury cars lined outside the grand estate of the Laurent family. Crystal chandeliers glowed through massive glass windows while wealthy businessmen, politicians, and elite socialites gathered inside for a wedding none of them truly approved of. At the center of the ballroom stood Elena Laurent. Beautiful, graceful, cold on the outside. The only daughter of billionaire hotel tycoon Victor Laurent, she wore a white gown worth more than most people's yearly salaries. Diamonds sparkled around her neck, yet her expression held no happiness. Because tonight she was marrying a man nobody respected. Adrien Vale. A quiet, ordinary-looking man in a simple black suit. No powerful surname. No fortune. No status. At least, that was what everyone believed. "You still have time to cancel this humiliation," Victor Laurent said quietly beside his daughter. "I can introduce you to senators, CEOs, princes even. Why throw your life away on a nobody?" Elena looked toward Adrien standing alone near the altar while guests whispered behind his back. "He saved my life," she answered softly. "And he never asked for anything in return." Victor's jaw tightened. Months ago, Elena had been involved in a terrible car accident during a snowstorm near the outskirts of the city. While dozens watched helplessly, one man entered the burning vehicle and carried her out before it exploded. That man was Adrien. After her recovery, the media praised him for a few days before forgetting him entirely. But Elena never forgot. She discovered he worked small jobs, lived modestly, and refused every financial reward her family offered. The more she tried to understand him, the more mysterious he became. And somehow, she fell in love. Not because of power. Not because of money. But because when she looked into his calm eyes, she felt safe. Even now, Adrien stood silently enduring the insults of people who considered him beneath them. "Look at his suit. He probably rented it. He's marrying her for money. He doesn't even belong here." Adrien heard every word. But his expression never changed. Because he had heard worse. Far worse. The priest signaled for the ceremony to begin. Elena slowly walked toward Adrien while cameras flashed endlessly around them. Yet Adrien only looked at her, not the diamonds, not the guests, not the wealth surrounding her. Only her. And for the first time that evening, Elena smiled. A small one. Real. When she reached him, Adrien gently held her trembling hands. "You can still walk away," he whispered quietly. Elena stared at him in disbelief. Even now, after everything, he was giving her freedom. "No," she whispered back. "I choose you." Those simple words shook something deep inside him. Because nobody had chosen Adrien Vale in a very long time. The vows continued. The guests clapped without sincerity. Victor Laurent looked furious. And hidden among the crowd, several men in black suits silently observed Adrien with expressions of shock. One of them leaned toward another. "Is that really him?" The second man swallowed nervously. "There's no mistake. But why would he hide here?" Either of them dared approach. Because the man standing at the altar as a poor nobody. That was actually one of the most powerful heirs in Europe. A man whose true name could shake governments. A man who disappeared 3 years ago after betrayal, bloodshed, and a deadly war within his own empire. A man the world believed was dead. Alexander Kingston. And tonight, he married a woman who knew absolutely nothing about who he truly was. Chapter 2: A Husband Nobody Respected. The Laurent mansion felt colder after the wedding. Servants bowed respectfully to Elena, yet barely acknowledged Adrien as he walked beside her through endless marble hallways. Every portrait hanging on the walls seemed to judge him. Victor Laurent made sure of it. "You will stay in the East Wing," Victor said during dinner. "It's usually for temporary guests." Temporary. The meaning was obvious. He did not consider Adrien family. Elena immediately frowned. "Father!" "It's fine," Adrien interrupted calmly. That only irritated Victor more. He wanted Adrien angry, embarrassed, broken. But the young man remained unnaturally composed no matter how much humiliation he received. At the massive dining table, conversations ignored Adrian completely. Business deals, luxury resorts, private investments, political connections. Nobody asked for his opinion. Until Elena suddenly placed food onto Adrian's plate. "You barely ate today," she said softly. The entire table went silent. Because Elena Laurent had never served anyone before. Victor's wife looked horrified. "Elena, the servants can do that." "She's my wife," Adrian said quietly. "She doesn't have to." Elena looked at him. Then smiled gently. "But I want to." Victor's hand tightened around his wine glass. His daughter had changed after meeting this man. She smiled more, argued less, and worst of all, she genuinely loved him. That made Adrian dangerous. After dinner, Elena led Adrian toward their room. "You don't have to tolerate this forever," she whispered apologetically. "I've experienced worse." His answer was simple. Too simple. As if insults from billionaires meant nothing compared to his past. Inside the room, Elena removed her earrings slowly while watching him carefully. "You hide things very well." Adrian paused slightly. "What do you mean?" "You never talk about yourself. Your past. Your family. Your dreams. Sometimes." She hesitated. "It feels like you're carrying an entire world alone." For the first time that night, something flickered behind his calm eyes. Pain. But it vanished instantly. "My past isn't important. It's important to me." Those words struck harder than any weapon. Because Elena loved him without conditions. Without knowing who he truly was. And that terrified him. If she discovered the truth, would she still look at him the same way? That night, after Elena fell asleep beside him, Adrian quietly stepped onto the balcony overlooking the city lights. The cold wind brushed against his face. Then his phone vibrated. A single encrypted message appeared. "They found you." Adrian's expression darkened instantly. Another message followed. "Return before the board starts the war." Far away in London, a massive corporate empire was collapsing. Executives were turning against each other. Underground alliances were forming. Billions of dollars were disappearing. And several powerful families wanted Alexander Kingston dead before he could reclaim control. Yet instead of returning, Adrian looked back toward the sleeping woman inside the room. For the first time in years he had peace. A home. Someone waiting for him. Someone who loved him before knowing his power. He slowly typed a reply. "I'm not coming back." But deep down, he already knew the past would never let him go. Chapter 3. The Billionaire's Daughter Learns Poverty. 3 months after the wedding, Elena made a shocking decision. She left the Laurent mansion with Adrian. Victor Laurent nearly exploded with rage. "You're abandoning your family for him?" "No," Elena answered calmly. "I'm choosing my husband." The media went wild. Headlines mocked her endlessly. "Millionaire heiress leaves luxury life for poor husband. Shall return within weeks. What does he have over her?" But Elena ignored everything. She moved into Adrian's small apartment in downtown Boston. It was tiny compared to the mansion she grew up in. No servants. No chauffeurs. No luxury. The kitchen barely fit 2 people. The heater worked only half the time. And yet, Elena had never felt happier. She burned breakfast almost every morning. She complained about grocery bags being too heavy. She accidentally mixed white clothes with black laundry. But Adrian never laughed at her. Instead, he patiently taught her everything. One snowy evening, Elena sat on the kitchen counter pouting after ruining dinner again. "I'm terrible at this." Adrian quietly tasted the burnt pasta. Then nodded seriously. "Yes." Elena stared at him in betrayal. A rare smile appeared on his lips. A real one. And Elena froze. Because Adrian almost never smiled. "You're making fun of me." "A little." "That's unfair." "You're cute when you're angry." Her face turned red instantly. Moments like these slowly melted the loneliness Adrian carried for years. He began sleeping peacefully again. The nightmares became less frequent. The constant instinct to watch every exit started fading. For the first time since his disappearance, Alexander Kingston was becoming human again. But peace never lasts forever. One afternoon, Elena visited Adrian unexpectedly at work. He supposedly worked at a small financial consulting firm. However, when she arrived downstairs, she noticed something strange. Luxury vehicles surrounded the building. Men in expensive suits waited nervously near the entrance. And through the glass walls inside, she saw Adrian. Not as the quiet, humble husband she knew, but as someone entirely different. Cold. Authoritative. Powerful. Several executives stood around him like terrified employees. One older man was practically begging. "Please reconsider the acquisition, sir." "Sir?" Elena frowned in confusion. Before she could hear more, Adrian suddenly turned toward the window. Their eyes met. And for the first time since their marriage, Elena saw fear in his expression. Not fear for himself. Fear of losing her. Because the carefully hidden world behind Adrian's veil was beginning to crack open. Chapter 4: Cracks in the Mask. The moment Adrian saw Elena standing outside the glass building, time itself seemed to stop. The executives around him continued speaking nervously about contracts and acquisitions, but their voices became distant noise in his mind. Elena stood frozen near the entrance. Confused. Hurt. Watching a version of him she had never seen before. The quiet husband who fixed leaking sinks and carried grocery bags without complaint was suddenly commanding a room full of powerful businessmen like a king addressing servants. And worst of all, everyone obeyed him. Adrian immediately walked toward the exit. The older executive behind him lowered his head respectfully. "Well, postpone the meeting, Mr. Kingston." Elena's heartbeat stopped. Kingston. The name echoed in her mind. She had heard it before. Not personally, but in magazines, international finance reports, and whispered conversations among elite investors. Kingston Holdings. One of Europe's largest private corporate empires. A family so wealthy and influential that politicians feared offending them. But before Elena could process anything, Adrian reached her. "Let's go home," he said quietly. Home. As if nothing had happened. As if her entire reality had not just shifted. The drive back was silent. Rain tapped softly against the car windows while Elena stared outside, her thoughts spinning endlessly. Finally, she spoke. "Who are you?" Adrian tightened his grip slightly on the steering wheel. "My name is Adrian." "That's not what they called you." Silence. The city lights reflected across his face, revealing exhaustion deeper than she had ever noticed before. "Please," Elena whispered. "Don't lie to me." That hurt him more than any accusation. Because he had lied. Every single day since meeting her. Not about loving her. Never that. But about everything else. When they reached the apartment, Adrian removed his coat slowly and stood near the window for several long moments. Then finally, "My real name is Alexander Kingston." Elena's chest tightened. The name sounded unreal coming from him. "You're rich?" A bitter smile touched his lips. "That's the first thing you ask?" "I don't care about money," she said immediately. "I care that my husband has another name." Her voice cracked slightly. Not from anger. From pain. Adrian closed his eyes briefly. He had faced assassination attempts, betrayals, corporate wars, and international scandals without fear. Yet standing before the woman he loved, he felt terrified. 3 years ago, he began quietly. My family empire became a battlefield. My father died unexpectedly. The board turned against itself. People I trusted sold information to our enemies. Elena listened silently. There were attempts on my life. Multiple ones. Someone inside the company wanted complete control, and I became a problem. So you disappeared? Yes. You let the world think you were dead? It was safer. For who? His eyes finally met hers. For everyone near me. That answer shook her deeply. Because he truly believed his existence endangered people. And me? She whispered. Did you ever plan to tell me? Adrian said nothing. And silence became the answer. Tears slowly filled Elena's eyes. Not because he was wealthy. Not because he lied about status. But because the man she loved carried unimaginable loneliness all by himself. You thought I'd leave. His jaw tightened. I didn't know what you would do. Elena stepped closer. You idiot. Before Adrian could react, she wrapped her arms tightly around him. I married you because you were kind to me when nobody expected anything from you. I married you because you stayed beside me in the hospital every night after the accident. I married you because you make me feel safe. Her voice trembled softly. I don't care if you're poor, rich, or secretly own half the world. For the first time in years, Alexander Kingston nearly broke. His hands slowly gripped her waist as if afraid she might disappear. You should hate me, he whispered. I should, Elena admitted softly. Then she looked up at him with tears in her eyes. But I love you more than I'm angry. Those words destroyed the final walls around his heart. He pulled her into his arms completely, holding her tightly while the storm raged outside. And for a brief, Alexander allowed himself to believe he could still have a normal life. But far away in Zurich, inside a dark private conference room, several powerful individuals stared at photographs spread across a table. One picture showed Alexander and Elena together outside their apartment. An older man lit a cigar slowly. So the ghost finally fell in love. Another man smirked coldly. That makes things easier. A woman beside them asked quietly. What about the wife? The room became silent. Then the older man answered calmly. If Alexander Kingston refuses to return willingly. He tapped Elena's photograph. That we give him a reason. Chapter 5, The First Threat. 2 weeks after learning the truth, Elena's life became stranger than ever. Suddenly, expensive black vehicles appeared outside their apartment building every morning. Strangers watched from distant corners. Adrian started checking locks repeatedly at night. Sometimes he would wake from sleep instantly after hearing the smallest sound. Once, Elena found him standing near the window at 3 a.m. holding a gun. That frightened her more than anything else. Not because he had the weapon, but because he handled it like someone long familiar with violence. You were never just a businessman, she whispered. Adrian remained silent for several seconds. No. That single word carried years of darkness. Elena slowly approached him. What happened to you? For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally, when my father died, people started killing each other for control. Friends disappeared. Some were murdered. Others betrayed us for power. His eyes became distant. I trusted the wrong people. And now? They know I'm alive. Elena's stomach tightened. Are we in danger? Yes. The honesty shocked her. But Adrian stepped closer immediately. I won't let anything happen to you. Elena believed him completely. That was the dangerous part. Because she knew Adrian would burn the world down before allowing anyone to hurt her. The next evening, Elena returned from grocery shopping and noticed the apartment door slightly open. Fear crawled through her instantly. Adrian? No response. She slowly stepped inside. The apartment looked untouched. Until she saw the dining table. A single black envelope rested at the center. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was one sentence. Return to Europe, Mr. Kingston. Below the message was a photograph. A photo of Elena entering a bookstore earlier that morning. Someone had been watching her closely. Before panic could fully settle in, the apartment door suddenly slammed shut behind her. Elena gasped and turned around, only to see Adrian standing there. But the moment he saw the envelope in her hand, his expression changed completely. Cold. Deadly. The terrifying calm of a man capable of violence. Who came here? He asked quietly. I don't know. Adrian grabbed the photo slowly. His jaw tightened. Then Elena noticed something chilling. He wasn't scared. He was furious. A dangerous silence filled the room. Adrian pulled out his phone and dialed a number immediately. The person answered within one ring. "Sir? Find out who entered my home." The temperature in his voice made Elena shiver. "And when you find them?" His eyes darkened completely. Make sure they understand what happens when someone touches my wife." Chapter 6. The Man the Underworld Feared. Elena had never seen Adrian like this before. No. Alexander. Even now, her mind struggled to connect the quiet husband who cooked late-night noodles with the terrifying man standing in front of her. His entire presence had changed. The warmth in his eyes disappeared. His movements became sharp, controlled, dangerous. After the phone call, Adrian opened a hidden compartment beneath the kitchen counter Elena never knew existed. Inside were passports, stacks of cash, weapons, and several phones. Elena stared in shock. "You prepared for this?" "I prepare for everything." The answer came instantly. Too instantly. As if survival had become instinct long ago. Adrian handed her a small black card. "If anything happens and you can't reach me, call this number only." "What is it?" "My private security line." Elena looked at him carefully. "How many secrets do you actually have?" His expression softened slightly. "Too many." That night, they left the apartment and moved into a heavily guarded penthouse overlooking the skyline of Chicago. The building itself looked more like a fortress than a residence. Armed guards monitored every entrance. Private elevators required biometric access. And everyone treated Adrian with absolute obedience. A tall man in a gray suit bowed respectfully the moment Adrian entered. "It's good to see you alive again, sir." Elena noticed the visible relief in the man's face. Not fake respect. Genuine loyalty. Adrian nodded once. "Status. We identified the men who entered your apartment. They work for Victor Orloff." The room instantly became tense. Even the guards exchanged uneasy looks. Elena frowned. "Who's Victor Orloff?" The gray-suited man hesitated before answering. "One of the most dangerous businessmen in Eastern Europe." "That's a polite way to describe a criminal," Adrian said coldly. Elena looked between them in disbelief. "This is criminal?" Adrian turned toward the city windows. "Powerful corporations and organized crime often share the same table. My family's empire was worth hundreds of billions. People killed for far less." Elena slowly realized the terrifying scale of the world Adrian came from. This wasn't just about business. This was war disguised in expensive suits. Later that night, Elena stepped onto the penthouse balcony alone, trying to clear her thoughts. The city lights stretched endlessly beneath her. She loved Adrian. That hadn't changed. But now she understood something painful. The man she married belonged to a world built on danger. And that world would never let him go peacefully. Behind her, Adrian quietly approached. "You're afraid." It wasn't a question. Elena stayed silent for a moment before answering honestly. "A little." He nodded slowly. "You should be." Most people would have tried comforting her. Adrian didn't lie. And somehow, that honesty mattered more. "You could still leave," he said quietly. "I can arrange protection. A new life. They won't touch you if you disappear from me." Elena turned toward him immediately. "Is that what you want?" The pain in his eyes answered before words could. "No." "Then stop saying things like that." She stepped closer until only inches separated them. "I didn't fall in love with your money. I fell in love with the man who stayed awake beside my hospital bed because I was scared of sleeping alone after the accident." Adrian's expression weakened slightly. "The man who walked in snow for an hour because I mentioned craving strawberry cake." A faint memory flickered in his eyes. "The man who pretends not to care but notices every tiny thing about me." Her voice softened. "That man is still you." For several seconds, Adrian said nothing. Then quietly, "You make me want things I can't afford." Elena blinked softly. What things? A future. The words sounded almost foreign to him, as if hope itself was dangerous. Before Elena could respond, alarms suddenly exploded across the penthouse. Red emergency lights flashed instantly. The guards outside shouted, "Lock down!" Adrian moved immediately. In less than a second, he pulled Elena behind him while reaching for a concealed handgun beneath his jacket. Gunfire erupted somewhere below the building. Elena froze in terror. The gray-suited man rushed into the room. "Sir, we're under attack." "How many?" "Unknown. They breached the parking levels." Adrian's face became ice. "Get Elena to the panic room." "I'm not leaving you." "You are." The dangerous authority in his voice stunned her. More gunshots echoed through the tower. The building shook slightly from an explosion below. Adrian grabbed Elena's shoulders tightly. "Listen to me carefully. Stay hidden until I come for you personally. Nobody else." "But..." "Elena." His forehead rested briefly against hers. And for the first time since she met him, she heard fear in his voice. Not for himself. For her. "I can survive anything except losing you." That shattered her resistance instantly. The guards escorted Elena toward a hidden security corridor while chaos erupted throughout the building. As she disappeared behind reinforced steel doors, she looked back one last time. Adrian stood in the center of the penthouse surrounded by armed men. Calm. Deadly. Like a king returning to war. One guard handed him an assault rifle. Another asked nervously, "Orders, sir?" Adrian loaded the weapon with terrifying familiarity. Then his cold eyes lifted slowly. "No survivors." Chapter 7: Blood in the Tower. The hidden panic room was silent except for Elena's breathing. Thick steel walls surrounded her while surveillance screens displayed different parts of the tower. Guards monitored entrances with military precision, yet the sound of distant gunfire still echoed faintly through the secure room. Elena sat frozen in a chair, her hands trembling. She had seen fear before. Anger. Arrogance. Cruelty. But what she saw in Adrian's eyes moments ago was something entirely different. A man prepared to become a monster for the person he loved. One of the guards beside the monitors pressed a hand against his earpiece. "Team 3 down." Another voice crackled through the speakers. "North corridor secured." Then, "Target engaged." The cameras flickered briefly, and Elena saw him. Alexander Kingston walked through the smoke-filled hallway with terrifying calm while armed men surrounded him. Broken glass covered the floor beneath his shoes. Two attackers lay unconscious against the walls. One man suddenly emerged from a side corridor firing wildly. Adrian moved instantly. One shot. The attacker collapsed immediately. Elena covered her mouth in shock. Not because Adrian defended himself, but because he looked horrifyingly experienced doing it. No hesitation. No panic. Only control. The guard near her noticed her expression and spoke quietly. Mr. Kingston trained military security teams before taking over Kingston Holdings. Elena looked at him. He was military. The guard hesitated. Not officially. That answer somehow sounded worse. Meanwhile, 30 floors below, the attackers realized too late they had entered the wrong building. Alexander Kingston was not merely a billionaire. He was a man shaped by betrayal, violence, and survival. And tonight, they had threatened the only person keeping his humanity alive. Inside the burning parking structure, Adrian cornered the final surviving attacker against a damaged vehicle. The man's weapon shook visibly. Please. Who sent you?" The attacker swallowed hard. "Orloff just wanted to pressure you into negotiations." "By attacking my home? We weren't supposed to kill her." That single sentence sealed his fate. Adrian's expression darkened completely. The attacker suddenly realized something horrifying. Alexander Kingston was far more dangerous when emotionally attached. Before anyone could react, a loud gunshot echoed through the garage. The security teams nearby fell silent instantly. One guard lowered his head slightly. Because everyone in that world understood one thing. You never threatened Alexander Kingston's wife. Hours later, the tower finally became quiet. Police sirens surrounded the streets below, though most officers would never learn the truth about what happened inside the building. Powerful people had ways of controlling stories. Elena remained in the panic room until the steel door finally opened. Adrian stepped inside slowly. His white shirt was stained with blood. Not all of it his own. For a moment neither spoke. Then Elena rushed toward him immediately. "You're hurt." "It's minor." A cut marked his forehead, and bruises darkened his knuckles. But Elena's eyes filled with tears anyway. "You could have died." Adrian gently touched her face. "But I didn't." The calmness in his voice almost made her angry. As if surviving violence was normal to him. Maybe it was. Elena carefully cleaned the blood from his skin later that night, while they sat alone inside the penthouse bedroom. The city outside remained awake with flashing police lights and helicopters. Yet inside the room, only silence existed between them. Finally, Elena whispered, "How many people have you killed?" The question hung heavily in the air. Adrian didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. Enough to lose sleep over. Elena stopped moving. He looked away toward the dark windows. "I spent years convincing myself violence was necessary. Sometimes it was. Sometimes." His jaw tightened slightly. "Sometimes I don't know anymore." For the first time, Elena saw guilt beneath his strength. Not pride. Not cruelty. Regret. Deep, endless regret. "You're not a bad man," she whispered. Adrian gave a faint, bitter smile. "You don't know everything." "Then tell me." Silence. Long, heavy. Finally, he stood and walked toward the balcony. Cold wind swept through the room as he stared down at the sleeping city. "When I was 26, someone betrayed my family from inside the company. Because of that betrayal, my younger brother died." Elena's breath caught. Adrian's voice remained calm, but pain hid beneath every word. He was only 19. The loneliness in that sentence shattered something inside her. "He trusted me to protect him." Adrian closed his eyes briefly. "I failed." Elena slowly approached him from behind. "You were carrying this alone the entire time?" "Yes." She wrapped her arms around him silently. And for several moments, the feared Alexander Kingston simply stood there letting someone hold him together. Then his phone vibrated. The atmosphere changed instantly. Adrian checked the message. His expression darkened. "What happened?" Elena asked quietly. He looked at her carefully. Then finally answered, "Your father is involved." Elena froze. "What?" Adrian handed her the phone. On the screen was a photograph taken earlier that evening. Victor Laurent entering a private meeting with Victor Orloff. Chapter 8: A Father's Betrayal. Elena stared at the photograph for so long that her vision blurred. Her father stood beside Victor Orloff inside a private underground lounge somewhere in Prague. The timestamp showed the meeting had happened only hours before the attack. "No." Her voice barely came out. "There has to be another explanation." Adrian remained silent. Not because he wanted to hurt her, but because he had already spent years learning a brutal truth. Powerful men rarely met by accident. Elena looked up at him desperately. "My father hates you, yes. But he wouldn't try to kill me." "I know." That answer surprised her. Adrian stepped closer. "The attack team was instructed not to harm you. That means Orloff wanted leverage, not blood. But why would my father meet him?" Adrian's eyes hardened slightly. "Because your father's company is collapsing." Elena blinked in shock. "What?" Victor Laurent hid it well. But several of his overseas investments failed last year. Debt started building quietly. Then competitors began buying influence inside his board. Elena struggled to process everything. Her father was one of the wealthiest businessmen in America. Or at least, she thought he was. Orloff probably offered him protection, Adrian continued calmly. In exchange for information about me. Elena's chest tightened painfully. Her own father. Helping dangerous people target her husband. The room suddenly felt suffocating. I need to talk to him. No. Elena turned sharply. He's my father. And Orloff is a predator. If Victor willingly entered business with him, then your father is already standing in dangerous territory. You don't know that. Adrian's expression darkened slightly. I know men like Orloff. The certainty in his voice frightened her. Because Adrian spoke like someone who had lived in that darkness himself. Elena stepped away, overwhelmed. I can't just sit here while everything falls apart. Before Adrian could answer, another voice suddenly interrupted from the doorway. Sir? The gray-suited guard entered quickly. We intercepted communications from Europe. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Report. There's movement inside Kingston Holdings. Several board members are pushing emergency succession protocols. Meaning, they were preparing to officially replace Alexander Kingston permanently. The guard hesitated before continuing. And there's another problem. What now? Someone leaked information about Mrs. Kingston to the media. Elena's stomach dropped instantly. Within minutes, every international news channel exploded with headlines. Missing Kingston heir alive. Secret marriage of Alexander Kingston revealed. Who is Elena Laurent? Photos of Elena flooded social media instantly. Pictures from their wedding. Private moments captured secretly. Even images of her entering cafes and bookstores. Someone had been watching her for far longer than they realized. Elena slowly sat down, pale. My life is over. No, Adrian said quietly. Just different. But his jaw remained tense. Because this was exactly what he feared. The world had finally discovered Elena existed. And in Alexander Kingston's world, love became weakness. Hours later, Elena stood alone inside the penthouse bedroom scrolling endlessly through hateful comments online. Gold digger. Manipulative wife. Attention seeker. Some even blamed her for Alexander's disappearance years ago despite never knowing him before then. Tears quietly rolled down her cheeks. Not because strangers insulted her, but because she now understood what Adrian sacrificed by hiding himself. This world destroyed people. Silently, Adrian entered the room behind her. Without speaking, he gently took the phone from her hands and turned it off. You shouldn't read those. They hate me. They hate anyone connected to power. Elena looked up at him painfully. Is this what your life has always been? A faint tiredness crossed his face. Yes. And you still chose to stay beside me? That question made him pause. Because the truth was simple. Meeting Elena saved him. She brought warmth into a life filled with cold survival. She reminded him he was still human. Adrian slowly sat beside her. When I first met you after the accident, he said quietly, you were terrified. Elena remembered. The hospital nights. The panic attacks. The fear of sleeping alone after nearly dying. You held my hand every night, she whispered. You smiled even when you were in pain. He looked at her softly. And somehow, you still worried about everyone else more than yourself. Elena's eyes filled again. No one had treated me kindly without wanting something first. Adrian gently brushed away her tears. I fell in love with you long before the wedding. The confession stunned her silent. Because Adrian almost never spoke openly about his feelings. You did? Yes. A faint sad smile touched his lips. That's why I tried to stay away from you. Elena blinked softly. What? You deserve someone normal. Instead of answering, Elena leaned forward and kissed him. Slowly. Tenderly. Not caring about billionaire empires, violence, scandals, or danger. Only him. For a few precious seconds, Alexander forgot the chaos surrounding them. Forgot enemies. Forgot war. Forgot the blood on his hands. There was only Elena. Only warmth. Only peace. Then suddenly, the penthouse lights shut off completely. Darkness swallowed the room. Every security alarm exploded at once. The guards outside shouted urgently. Power failure! Adrian instantly pulled Elena behind him. His entire body became alert. Deadly. Then a voice echoed calmly through the emergency speaker system. Good evening, Alexander. Adrian's eyes turned ice cold immediately. He recognized that voice. Victor Orloff. I believe it's time we finally met face to face. Chapter 9. The Devil Calls Personally. Emergency red lights flickered through the penthouse, painting the walls in crimson shadows. Elena's heartbeat thundered loudly as Adrian pulled her behind him instinctively. Every muscle in his body tightened with lethal focus. Then Victor Orloff's voice echoed again through the speakers. You've become difficult to reach, Alexander. Cold. Smooth. Almost amused. Adrian stared toward the dark ceiling without blinking. How did you enter my systems? A low chuckle answered him. You disappeared for 3 years and still underestimate me. That hurts. Around them, security teams rushed through the hallways trying to restore power. Backup generators struggled to activate while communication systems flickered repeatedly. Orloff continued calmly. You know, I expected many things from you. Revenge. Violence. Perhaps even surrender eventually. A pause. But marriage? Elena felt Adrian's hand tighten slightly around hers. That surprised me. Get to the point, Adrian said coldly. Very well. Orloff's tone sharpened slightly. Return to Europe. Reclaim your seat at Kingston Holdings. Stop hiding behind this fantasy life. And if I refuse? Silence lingered briefly. Then, you already know the answer. The speaker cut abruptly. At the same moment, the backup power finally returned. Lights flooded the penthouse again. The guards immediately secured every entrance while Adrian remained perfectly still. Elena looked at him carefully. He wants you back. Yes. Why? Adrian's expression darkened. Because as long as I'm alive, nobody can fully control the Kingston Empire. The gray-suited security chief entered quickly. Sir, we restored systems. No physical breach detected. Meaning Orloff hacked them remotely. That alone terrified everyone in the room. Adrian nodded once. Double external security. Elena doesn't leave protection detail under any circumstance. The guard hesitated. And you, sir? Adrian's eyes became distant. In going to Europe. Elena froze instantly. No. He turned toward her quietly. Elena. No. The single word carried real fear. You said returning could restart the war. It already restarted. The truth hung painfully between them. Adrian walked toward the window overlooking the city skyline. Helicopter lights moved across the dark sky while distant sirens echoed below. For 3 years I avoided the board, the families, the enemies. All of it. His voice remained calm. I thought if I disappeared long enough, they'd destroy each other without me. But they didn't. No. Instead, they waited. And now they found the one weakness Alexander Kingston could never ignore. Elena. She approached him slowly. If you go back there, will you come back? That question struck deeper than she realized. Because Adrian honestly didn't know. Europe represented blood, betrayal, and unfinished wars. The moment he returned publicly, every enemy who once hunted him would move again. And this time, Elena would stand beside him. That made everything infinitely more dangerous. Adrian gently touched her cheek. They'll always come back to you. Elena wanted to believe him. But she suddenly remembered something painful. People in Alexander's world made promises while standing beside graves. Later that night, Elena couldn't sleep. She stood alone in the penthouse kitchen staring blankly at untouched tea while her thoughts spiraled endlessly. Then a quiet voice interrupted her. You should rest. She turned to see the gray-suited security chief. Without the chaos around him, he looked older. Tired. What's your name? Elena asked softly. Damien. You've known Adrian a long time? A faint smile appeared. Longer than most. Elena hesitated before asking carefully, "What was he like before?" Damien became quiet for several moments. Then finally, "Different." "How?" "He used to smile more." That answer hurt unexpectedly. Damien leaned slightly against the counter. Alexander wasn't born cold. People made him that way. Elena listened silently. When his father died, the company turned into war overnight. Board members betrayed each other. Assassinations started happening quietly. Damien's jaw tightened slightly. Then his younger brother was killed during a failed negotiation setup. Elena's chest tightened again. After that, Alexander changed. How? He stopped trusting anyone. Damien looked toward the dark hallway thoughtfully. Until you. Elena blinked softly. He talks differently around you. Sleeps better. Eats properly. A faint amused smile crossed Damien's face. Before you, the man practically lived on coffee and revenge. Despite everything, Elena laughed quietly through her sadness. Then Damien's expression turned serious again. You should know something, Mrs. Kingston. The formal title still sounded unreal. What is it? There's a reason powerful people fear Alexander. Elena listened carefully. Damien's voice lowered. Because when someone he loves gets threatened, he becomes merciless. At that exact moment, Elena heard footsteps approaching. Adrian entered the kitchen wearing a dark coat, gloves, and the cold expression she now recognized too well. Damien straightened immediately. Vehicle is ready, sir. Elena's stomach dropped. You're leaving now? Yes. Where? Adrian's eyes met hers. To send Orloff a message. Before she could stop him, he stepped closer and kissed her forehead gently. Lock the doors after me. Then Alexander Kingston walked away into the night. And somewhere deep inside her heart, Elena suddenly understood something terrifying. The war had truly begun. Chapter 10: The Beginning of the End. Winter covered Vienna in silver snow when Alexander Kingston finally returned to Europe publicly. The moment his private jet landed, the financial world erupted. News channels exploded with headlines. The Kingston heir returns. Corporate war enters final phase. Who will control the Kingston empire? But none of them understood the truth. This was no longer about money. It had become personal. Inside a heavily guarded estate outside the city, the remaining board members of Kingston Holdings gathered nervously around a massive conference table. Some looked relieved Alexander was alive. Others looked terrified. Because they knew exactly what kind of man walked through those doors now. Not the idealistic heir from years ago, but a survivor. Alexander entered the room wearing a black overcoat, while silence consumed the entire hall. Nobody dared speak first. Finally, one older executive stood slowly. Mr. Kingston. Welcome back. Alexander's cold eyes moved across the room carefully. He recognized every face. The loyal ones, the cowards, the traitors, and the men who secretly hoped he had stayed dead. They'll keep this simple, he said calmly. His voice echoed sharply through the silent room. You had 3 years to destroy each other. Nobody moved. You failed. A dangerous stillness settled over the table. Then Alexander placed several documents onto the polished surface. Evidence. Illegal offshore transfers. Secret meetings. Bribes. Internal sabotage. Every hidden betrayal laid bare. One executive turned pale immediately. Another began sweating. You investigated us? Someone whispered. Alexander's gaze became ice. I investigated everyone. At the far end of the table, a younger board member suddenly slammed his fist down. You disappeared, he shouted angrily. The company nearly collapsed because of you. Alexander slowly looked at him. No. The room became colder somehow. It nearly collapsed because weak men mistook my absence for permission. Nobody spoke again after that. Meanwhile, across the city, Elena stood near the large windows of Alexander's temporary estate residence. Snow drifted softly outside while international news continued discussing her husband endlessly. Some called him a genius. Others called him dangerous. Some even called him a ghost returned from the dead. But Elena knew the truth beneath all of it. Alexander was tired. Every night he returned home carrying invisible weight on his shoulders. Every morning he left before sunrise. And despite his calm exterior, the war was exhausting him. One evening, Elena waited for him near the fireplace long after midnight. When Alexander finally entered the room, he looked exhausted beyond words. His tie hung loose. A bruise darkened his jaw. Elena stood immediately. "You're hurt again." "It's nothing." But his voice sounded worn down. Elena walked closer and gently touched the bruise. "You say that every time." Alexander looked at her quietly. Then suddenly, he leaned forward and rested his forehead against her shoulder. The action shocked her completely. Because this powerful man almost never allowed himself weakness. "Elena." His voice sounded distant. "Tired?" A faint humorless laugh escaped him. "I don't even remember what resting feels like anymore." Her heart ached instantly. Without speaking, she guided him toward the couch and sat beside him quietly while snow fell outside the windows. For several minutes neither spoke. Then Alexander finally whispered, "When this ends?" Elena looked at him softly. "Yes? I want to disappear again." She blinked. "What?" "No boardrooms. No politics. No bodyguards." His tired eyes lifted toward her slowly. "Just us." For the first time in months, Elena saw genuine longing inside him. Not for power. Not for revenge. For peace. "You'd really leave all this behind?" "Yes." "What about the empire?" Alexander became silent briefly. Then quietly, "I inherited a kingdom built on fear and blood. Maybe it deserves someone else." Elena gently held his hand. "You're not responsible for saving everything alone." His fingers tightened around hers slowly. "You're the only good thing I found after all this darkness." Those words nearly broke her heart. Because she realized something painful. Alexander truly believed he didn't deserve happiness. Before Elena could answer, Damien suddenly entered the room urgently. "Sir?" Alexander immediately straightened. "What happened?" "We intercepted Orloff's final movement." The room grew tense instantly. "Location?" Damien handed over a file. "A private fortress near the mountains outside Bratislava." Alexander opened the file silently. Satellite images. Security routes. Armed personnel. And hidden among the documents, a photograph of Victor Laurent. Elena's breath caught sharply. Her father looked older now. Worried. Trapped. Damien spoke carefully. "Victor Laurent has been under Orloff's control for months. Financial blackmail. Debt leverage. Threats." Alexander's jaw tightened. "So he wasn't willingly loyal?" "No." Elena slowly sat down. "My father." For months she carried anger toward him. But now she realized the horrifying truth. Victor Laurent had become another pawn in Orloff's game. Damien looked directly at Alexander. "This is our opportunity. If Orloff falls, the war ends." Silence filled the room. Everyone understood what that meant. One final confrontation. One final battle. And perhaps one final chance for Alexander Kingston to finally become free. Chapter 11: The Last Fortress. Snowstorms swept across the mountains near Bratislava as black armored vehicles moved silently through the frozen roads. Inside the lead vehicle, Alexander Kingston sat quietly beside Damien while tactical maps glowed across digital screens. No one spoke much. Because everyone understood the weight of tonight. Years of betrayal. Bloodshed. Fear. All leading here. Elena watched from the estate command room through secure communications while anxiety twisted painfully inside her chest. She hated this. Hated the weapons. The violence. the coldness that returned to Alexander whenever war surrounded him. But she also understood something now. Some battles follow people whether they want them or not. And Alexander had spent years running from this one. No longer. Meanwhile, hidden deep within the mountains, Victor Orloff stood inside his heavily guarded fortress staring at the snow outside massive reinforced windows. Unlike Alexander, Orloff enjoyed power openly. Luxury. Fear. Control. To him, human lives were tools. Disposable pieces on a board. A guard approached nervously. "Sir? Kingston's movement has been confirmed." Orloff smiled faintly. So he finally came personally. Another man beside him asked quietly. "Should we prepare evacuation?" Orloff's eyes darkened with amusement. No. He slowly poured himself a drink. "Tonight decides everything." Back on the mountain road, Alexander checked his weapon calmly while Damien studied him carefully. "You still have time to reconsider." Alexander gave a faint, humorless smile. "You sound like Elena." "That woman is smarter than both of us." For the first time all evening, a tiny softness crossed Alexander's face. Then disappeared instantly. Damien lowered his voice. "When this ends, what will you do?" Alexander looked out toward the snow-covered darkness. "Disappear." "You really mean it?" "Yes." Damien nodded slowly. Honestly, he wasn't surprised. The man sitting beside him never truly wanted the empire. Only responsibility forced him into it. And only Elena gave him a reason to imagine life beyond it. Hours later, the vehicles stopped near the outer perimeter of Orloff's fortress. Massive walls rose from the mountain cliffs like something built for war itself. Searchlights scanned the snow endlessly. Armed guards patrolled every tower. Damien looked toward Alexander. "Your orders?" Cold wind swept through the silence. Then Alexander answered quietly. "End it." The assault began instantly. Explosions shattered the outer gates while security teams breached the compound from multiple directions. Gunfire echoed violently through the snowy mountains as Orloff's men fought desperately. Inside the fortress, chaos erupted. Orloff calmly watched surveillance screens while alarms screamed throughout the building. "Alexander always was dramatic," he murmured. One guard shouted urgently. "They breached the eastern corridor." Another yelled. "Lower security levels compromised." Still, Orloff remained strangely calm. Because he believed he understood Alexander Kingston. He believed love made him weak. But he misunderstood one critical thing. Love had not weakened Alexander. It gave him something finally worth surviving for. Deep inside the fortress corridors, Alexander moved through armed resistance with terrifying precision. Years of violence returned to him effortlessly. Every movement calculated. Every shot controlled. Yet beneath the cold efficiency burned one overwhelming purpose. Finish this. Go home to Elena. Finally. Meanwhile, Elena waited anxiously in the estate command room watching fragmented security feeds from the operation. Every gunshot made her chest tighten. Every moment of silence terrified her more. Then suddenly, one screen froze. Damien's voice crackled through communications. "We found Victor Laurent." Elena stood instantly. "What?" The screen switched to a locked underground room. Her father sat restrained in a chair, bruised and exhausted but alive. Tears filled Elena's eyes immediately. "He's alive!" But before relief could fully settle, gunfire exploded loudly through the communication line. The feed cut out. Static filled the room. "Elena," another security operator said urgently. "We lost visual on Mr. Kingston." Fear consumed her instantly. Far below the fortress, Alexander entered Orloff's private chamber alone. The massive room overlooked the snowy mountains through towering glass walls. And standing calmly beside the fireplace was Victor Orloff. The older man smiled faintly. "There you are." Alexander raised his weapon without hesitation. "This ends tonight." Orloff sipped his drink casually. "You know, your father once pointed a gun at me exactly like that." Alexander's expression didn't change. You killed him! No, Orloff answered softly. The Empire killed him! Silence settled heavily between them. Then Orloff studied Alexander carefully. She really changed you. Alexander's eyes darkened instantly. Don't say her name. That protective already? Orloff chuckled quietly. Interesting. In one sudden motion, hidden guards emerged from the shadows surrounding the chamber. Weapons aimed directly at Alexander. Yet Alexander remained completely calm. Because he expected betrayal. Always. Orloff slowly set down his glass. You could have ruled everything beside me, Alexander. Instead, you chose love. For the first time, Alexander spoke without coldness. Without anger. Only certainty. Yes. That single word carried more strength than violence ever could. Orloff sighed almost sadly. Then you were never built for this world. Alexander slowly lowered his weapon slightly. No. His eyes became distant for one brief moment. I was built for her. And then, the room erupted into violence. Chapter 13. A New Beginning. Spring arrived softly over the countryside outside Florence, where Alexander and Elena finally settled far away from the chaos that once consumed their lives. The mansion they chose was nothing like the cold estates owned by powerful families. It was peaceful, warm, surrounded by endless green hills, vineyards, and quiet mornings filled with sunlight instead of security alarms. Alexander kept his promise. He stepped away from Kingston Holdings completely after restructuring leadership and handing operational control to trusted executives. The empire still carried his name, but no longer controlled his life. For the first time in years, he belonged to himself. And to Elena. Life became strangely simple afterward. They cooked together in oversized kitchens despite having staff. Alexander learned how to garden badly. Elena laughed every time he became overly competitive while playing chess against elderly neighbors in nearby villages. At night, they sat beside fireplaces with wine and quiet conversations instead of discussing war and betrayal. Sometimes Elena would catch him staring at her silently. What? She would ask with a smile. Alexander usually answered the same way. Still making sure this is real. Because part of him still couldn't believe peace existed. One rainy evening, Elena stood alone in the bathroom staring at the small test trembling in her hands. Her heartbeat pounded loudly. Positive. She checked again. Then again. Still positive. For several long moments, she simply stared blankly while emotions overwhelmed her completely. Fear. Shock. Happiness. Love. Tears slowly filled her eyes. Alexander was downstairs in the library reading financial reports he claimed he no longer cared about. Elena walked toward him quietly, still trembling slightly. He immediately noticed something different. What happened? She tried speaking. Failed. Then silently handed him the test. Alexander frowned slightly in confusion. Then realization hit him. Completely. For the first time since Elena met him. Alexander Kingston looked genuinely speechless. You're. Elena nodded slowly, tears already falling. We're having a baby. The room became utterly silent. Alexander stared at her as if the entire world had suddenly stopped moving. A baby. His child. Something fragile. Innocent. A life created from two broken people who somehow found love in the middle of darkness. Elena suddenly laughed nervously through tears. Say something. Alexander stood slowly. For several seconds, he simply looked at her. Then unexpectedly, his eyes filled with tears too. That shocked Elena more than anything. Because this was a man who survived violence, betrayal, and war without breaking. Yet now, his hands trembled. He crossed the room quickly and pulled Elena into his arms so tightly she could feel his heartbeat racing wildly. You're okay? He whispered immediately. Elena laughed softly. Yes. You saw a doctor? Not yet. I only found out today. Alexander nodded instantly. Well, schedule appointments tomorrow. The best doctors. You sound panicked. I am panicked. That made Elena laugh harder. Alexander rested his forehead gently against hers. A baby. The words sounded fragile in his voice. Almost sacred. Then suddenly his expression shifted slightly. Fear. Real fear. Elena noticed immediately. What is it? Alexander looked away briefly. I don't know how to be a father. Her heart melted instantly. You'll be amazing. You don't know that. I do. Elena gently touched his face. Because you already love this baby. Alexander closed his eyes slowly. And she was right. The thought terrified him because he already knew one dangerous truth. He would destroy anyone who threatened his family. Months passed peacefully afterward. The mansion slowly transformed. Empty rooms became nurseries. Alexander secretly bought absurd amounts of baby clothes despite pretending he wasn't emotional about it. Elena caught him one afternoon standing silently inside the nursery holding a tiny pair of shoes. You're doing it again. Alexander looked almost embarrassed. Doing what? Pretending you're not excited. A faint smile appeared on his lips. Then he carefully placed a hand against Elena's growing stomach. The moment the baby kicked for the first time, Alexander froze completely. Elena laughed softly. That's your child saying hello? Something changed permanently in his eyes right then. Not fear. Not darkness. Wonder. Pure wonder. He slowly knelt in front of her and rested his forehead gently against her stomach. And for the first time in his entire life, Alexander Kingston truly felt what peace meant. Not power. Not wealth. Not victory. Home.